Welcome here, welcome at our second cycle of talks, Reinventing School from Arbitrary to Z33. Reinventing School started as a strange question to do something around schools and maybe can become a real discussion platform, not only here today, but also later on the internet. Initiated by Angela Rui and Abitare, and now a little bit adopted by Z33. Today the questions are very diverse, but are schools shows making culture? That's the question for Beatrice Galilee and for Alexandra Midal. I hope they can answer.
So welcome to everybody. We asked Alexandra Midal and Beatrice Galilee to answer this question. They are both curators, working in curators of architecture and design, working in a slightly different environment, but doing very interesting research in this moment. So Beatrice is chief curator of the Triennale in Lisbon, and also founder and director of the space in London Poker Hall, and Alexandra is the director of the Master in Design at HED in Geneva and has a wonderful exhibition here with the students. So the question is really about shows done by school where the students are involved and understanding if this become a way of making counter, or is a way of for students to learn, or is a way of show off what the school does. So how you use this kind of like tools. So so I don't know, now she has the mic, so she will start.
Well, maybe I would ask Alexandra, in which way, and how would you argue that they're not making culture? Would there be an argument to say that education exhibitions are not culture? Because in a way, it would be. I would find that quite a difficult argument to make.
Agree.
Totally agree.
But do this exhibition in the school become a way of learning for the students, or a way of learning for the outside environment?
Well, from my perspective as a curator, I teach a little bit, but I'm not involved in any way in school exhibitions, and I'm primarily working in architecture schools. And architecture school exhibitions are usually really disappointing, and they don't usually provide culture and content in the way that design school exhibitions do. So maybe that's one kind of key difference, because architecture students are required to kind of fulfill various really tedious representations of their buildings in terms of its, solar efficiency and stuff like that, which actually doesn't make for interesting culture. Perhaps in the way that a design exhibition can be a lot more one-to-one and creative and much more kind of, content-driven. So I think there is a distinction between my practice, which is primarily architecture, and perhaps what you're doing, which is much more about design.
Slav master in architecture. So no, the thing is, I think it should be broadened, because the fact is that we can think about shows in terms as a frame for thinking. It's a very specific one. It's a format for the thinking, I think, and that's also a question that the curator should raise. I mean, as a curator, as a freelance curator first, the question of school is just one part of the curating processes, and in fact, what we can question, especially here in Milan, is that is a show the promotion of a product, or is a show a place where you can think? That's very easy for me to talk like that, because I just have a show called Rethink, and that's maybe one key word for me. But at least what I can say is that the exhibition is itself an autonomous field, which has its own history. It's not really well known in the field of design, but it is. And I then think that it's something that should be looked at in a very different fashion than what a product display would be. I will not go back to history, it's just a little bit, but of course, the question of design at the turn of the mid-19th century was really linked to the question of display of the merchandise, and we are really dealing with something very different. The question today, and that's the question I raise with my students at HEAD, is that do we have to think in terms of an exhibition? Can we think, sorry, just to rephrase it more precisely, is there another possibility to make a show than the one of the display and the grand magasin, which was the historical way of doing it, and or the art way of doing a display? Is there a possibility, maybe not in between, but somewhere else, where we can question and raise the concept, because it's a concept of exhibiting an exhibition. So I think it's extremely interesting in that sense. And there is no possibility to give a specific answer, as there is no possibility to define very precisely what would be an art show. But I think it's a working process, and that's something that is extremely puzzling in the work design and for students also, of course, because doing products every year in a salon et mobile, what's the point? I won't go too much into politics, but there is, of course, a very important issue, but it's not the topic of today. But what I can say for sure is that exhibiting, if you consider it not as a display but as a way to think, then you can explore and be very innovative with that in a greater sense.
So since somehow in this frame the exhibition becomes more a way of learning to create something, more than a way of learning to become a designer or an architect.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about education and what's amazing about being a student is that there really shouldn't be those kind of constraints about production and manufacturing and anything really. I mean, you should be able to be a student and be free to kind of have that huge space to think about your ideas and to explore things and to experiment. And I think there's we should really be encouraging that kind of fantasy, kind of exploration of really what anything could happen, and what could happen really, I suppose, in an exhibition, what could happen in terms of whatever they're thinking about in design and architecture. And I think there should be a lot more kind of less practical stuff. You know, why is it also practical? I mean, there's absolutely no need for it, and particularly I think in the field of architecture, it's so unnecessary. And exactly what Alexandra was talking about, like why can't we just use that amazing facility of the exhibition to explore ideas and to really pursue kind of concepts or radical concepts? And I think it would be great to see more of that, more of the exhibition being used to produce culture deliberately, rather than being used to kind of test out things for, you know, in some kind of training facility to become a kind of professional designer.
Sorry, I still agree. We still agree. That's the bad news because we can fight. Sorry, not yet. Of course, that's the point. It's that it produces culture, and if you think also in terms of what is usually the culture of exhibiting for designers, my experience as I come from the art world was that the designers are absolutely in school, within school, outside of school, they have no clue about what a show is. They learn how to set up display for other works, for works of art. When it comes to their work, as much as you have in many art school departments where you learn how to exhibit your own work, that's a point which is absolutely entirely forgotten from the point of view of the students. And I think that then it becomes much more a statement that the show is not to be at the service, and a designer is not at the service of everyone. It's not Superman, he's not going to save anyone, and he's not at the service of other big cultural things. For me, the design world is, even if it's not equal, maybe above lots of other things. And just to say, the thing is that if you realize that a show for students is also a way to express themselves and not to be at the service of everyone, and maybe the key word would be to tell a story. And just to finish with that point, I don't know for you, but I'm so bored with all that shows about design where you have to read the manual of how the things are technically made, how, I mean, if I want to read that kind of things, I have a catalog at home, I read it. But maybe a show should be a place where you tell a story, where there's a kind of predation, where there's a sense of the suspense, where you are discovering something at the end, and this discovery can be very fulfilling the senses of the spectator.
And would you push in your school, but also maybe also your practice there at school at the point where, because anyhow, all this exhibition I'm seeing from the schools, there is always a professor who is actually leading the group or creating. So will you push the system to a point where actually are the students really decide what to do, how to do, being the creator, and maybe put the professor in the opposite situation where they are kind of like have to do something for them, trying to reverse even in that experiment, the relationship between students and teachers?
Should that happen or does it happen?
We don't see this so much. There is always a professor who is leading at the end, somehow.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point because I think a lot of students that I'm working with and also in the end come to work for me or with me actually find the pursuit of curating quite a viable career choice for them as well, and they're interested in exploring criticism and critical design, and for them to become a curator is also like, well, maybe that's slightly more interesting than making whatever it is that they might be making in the future. So I think it could become a much more creative process, and I totally agree, than the kind of classical bunch of students trying to impress their tutor with all these things.
I would answer too. Yeah. First, sometimes you need a professor to check the budget. Aside of that, we opened 2 years ago a space in Geneva called the Design Project Room, in which our students are doing everything. Sometimes it can be a really big failure, but I think it's part of the school. That's the beauty of the school, is that we don't have to be that efficient. And sometimes it's just good to have a try. And so it really, we have shows like that. We did the Carlo Molino shows, and next show about the IMSS is entirely 100% in Geneva, the work of the students, and they decided what they want to do. Of course, as a professor, as a curator, I can be surprised, but it's part of it. And if you really want to use the school as an exploratory field and as a platform to think, then it has to be like that, if the students want to do it. I can give you an example. We had a PRD show, and the girls were crazy about the shoes, of course. Sorry. And we offered them to do the show exactly the way they wanted, to choose everything, to do everything, invitation cards, space and everything. And at that point, they couldn't do it. But they're doing the next show, so it's also one-on-one, something you have to have case study examples. If we think in terms of Milan is probably the place where students are not doing their shows. Absolutely not, because it's a political thing about how to express and convey what the school is to attract students and get the press and the media from all over the world. But Milan is not the only place where there are shows by students. And it's also interesting to see that within the schools, shows most of the time either are not made by the students. So it's a very rare thing, and I think that platform where you can invent things and let the students fail or not is exactly the way I'm thinking that a school should work.
There's also probably an issue of audience, like the things that I think is nice here in Milan is that the audience is a general design and experts, but there's a general audience where in the school, if you're going to show in the school, somehow it's also speaking to your own institution, to your own schools and so on. So I think that's also the change. Last things, Beatrice, will you in Lisbon involve work in some schools, involve some students, involve some of the university? There is a part that is open to institutions, so are the schools also participating in that?
Yeah, we had an open competition, an open student competition, which actually didn't receive that many applications. We were a bit disappointed. But the students that won were actually from the RCA, and it was a real pleasure because what we encouraged was that students from different disciplines applied. So it didn't make it 100% that you have to, in order to enter, you had to be an interdisciplinary team, but it was made quite clear that that would be an advantage. And the people that won were 6 different disciplines and 5 different countries. And they really kind of investigated the topic and so on, and they did a great job. But it was great. I would have liked quite a few of those of the ones that applied to actually exhibit, and we're trying to figure out second and third place. Maybe there'll be a way that we can actually get them involved, which is really nice. And the Institute Effect is an exhibition which is a kind of homage to the contemporary architecture or sort of spatial condition of the institution today. And we are inviting some educational institutions. We're inviting the Straka Institute to come and participate. But I think it's, I mean, for us, I really like architecture students to participate in the shows. I mean, as practicing architects, I suppose, like, to really make stuff. But yeah, it's, I don't know, we've been struggling to engage with the Portuguese students. I think we haven't, I don't know whether I haven't quite gone into enough lectures or something like that. But yeah, I hope that we will have a bit more maybe over summer.
Okay, so before passing to the next guest, if you, in 1 minute, Alexandra, have to say an experiment for education that you think is interesting happening somewhere else that is not involved directly you and your school, that is doing someone else and you think is...
Can I use history?
Sorry?
Can I use history?
Yeah.
Or do I have to be contemporary?
No.
Okay. Probably one of the early models that I really worship more than anything is Charles Platnier, Cours Supérieur in La Chaux-de-Fonds, Swiss. That's the guy who decided when it was it was the end of the work of all watches, the way that they were designed before, and all the students were doing that kind of things. And it was so much in advance understanding what's going to happen that he came to choose some of the students. So I love the idea that you choose your students because it makes sense. That's what you do in life, everywhere, but in schools. So most of the time. So he went to see. I don't think you choose your family. Did you?
No, you don't have to.
Yeah, oh yeah, exactly. So the thing is, he picked up students like the very young future next to be Le Corbusier. And you look at him, and he was 16, and he was just drawing things, and he said, you become an architect. And what he did is that he took like 12 students, and he took his phone, and he called everyone like Auguste Perret, and everyone to send the students to do their intern everywhere, and the idea was that they would come back after 3 months with any kind of information. It could be samples, it could be experiences, it could be books, it could be writings, and they were writing to the professor was writing back to them, and then at the end they were sharing something in a way to reinvent the school. Of course, Charles Platnier was 25. The La Chaux-de-Fonds couldn't stand that, and they fired him after a year. But I think it's a really great example. School should be talking about that kind of perspective. And just to finish answering really the questions, our schools shows making culture. What we have to do is to realize that culture can be made by shows, and of course, that's the point.
Thank you very much. Beatrice, you have something like an example, contemporary historical, that you want to point out about school education and successful.
That was the best.
Okay, thanks a lot.